At this point, I think my blood is just like 95% McDonald's sweet tea. I'm okay with that. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am the chatty introvert, Victoria, and today we're going to talk about movies. Surprise, surprise. We're not just talking about any movies though. We're talking about movies that I personally feel... Could that car's music be any louder? So these are just films that I personally don't feel like get talked about enough. I have a bunch. So this could go on for hours, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. This is not going to be Tim Burton Part 2 where you have to sit and watch me for 2 hours. I narrowed it down to 5 movies? 6? I narrowed it down to 5. So these are just 5 that I've compiled that you may have seen or may not have seen, but you should see them. Oh, also, I'm going to put on the screen next to the title where I watched this movie, because a lot of the ones I'm about to talk about you can watch on very popular streaming services, so if you have them, awesome, and it'll be down there somewhere, so you can check them out at your will. So the first movie I want to talk about is, well, I don't want to say it's the most ridiculous on this list, but it's definitely the most out there, and that movie is Swiss Army Man. Swiss Army Man came out in 2016, and it was directed by 2 gentlemen who are known as the Daniels, because both of their names are Daniel. Their names are Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinhardt. That's definitely not how you say his name. I tried real hard, and I probably butchered it. And our stars of this movie are Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe, aka Harry Potter. I know he has a real name, but it's just easier for me to call him Harry. Also, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, her photo is in like 98% of this movie, but she really only comes in like in the last like 5 to 8 minutes. But she's there, and she's great. The studio behind this movie is A24, which is, I would say, highly known for making very avant-garde films with a lot of long shots drawn out, put to very orchestral music. So the basic premise, if you can call it basic, which I don't really think you can, is you got Paul Dano. He got on a boat and just decided that he wanted to like peace out from his average life, and he ends up getting shipwrecked on an island, and on this island washes up the body of Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, who is seemingly a dead man. He's a corpse, and then a couple minutes into the movie you find out that this corpse is sentient, and that he can talk and he can think. He can't really move all that much, but he can do basic human things. He's able to use this new friend of his as essentially a Swiss Army knife. He can do anything with it. He can get water, he can use his arms to chop wood, he can start fires, he can do a plethora of different things. And through the process of using him in a very materialistic way, he also has to reteach this essentially dead human about what life is like as a human again, which is where the real part of this movie shines for me. The friendship between Paul Dano's character and Daniel Radcliffe's character is essentially the thing that makes this movie, because they're the only 2 people on camera besides like a few pictures of some people throughout the movie. This is basically just existential crisis the movie, to be quite honest with you. The entire time they're both trying to figure out what their purpose is, while also still managing to survive out in the wild by themselves. They're both 2 very lost souls who either were not appreciative of what they had before, or were tired of something that they had before and didn't really do anything about it to change it. It also touches on the topic of just life is what you make it. It's really, if you want your life to be a certain way, you're the only one who can make that happen for yourself. I've dead body Daniel Radcliffe questioning everything that Paul Dano is telling him. You know, why are you telling me that this is weird? Or why are you telling me that I shouldn't do this? Or why do humans think that this is wrong when it's just something that we do naturally? And that's something that, you know, really, as an audience member, it's nice when movies make you think. Like, why are certain things the way that they are? And it's good to ask questions. The music in this film is definitely one of the starring things other than the two leads. It's very barbershop quartet style. It's a lot of just harmonies and clapping and stomping, and that to me is really cool because it's a very organic way of making music, and a lot of movies tend to make their soundtracks very computer generated, or they just reuse the same type of music from other films, which is fine. Budget is a thing that people have to worry about. But it was just nice to hear something very different than what I feel like the typical film goer is used to in the musical aspects of film. If you're not into farts, don't watch this movie. I don't want anybody to get mad at me, talk about some, you recommended me this, and half of this movie's sounds are flatulence. It makes sense in the context of the movie when you're watching it, why the farts are happening, but just giving you a little flatulence warning. If you hate it, maybe bypass this movie. Overall, it's just a really good buddy film, and it definitely has a film festival vibe to it, and people who are into movies will know what I'm talking about when I say film festival vibe. And I remember reading some things that it did do very well at festivals, which is not surprising to me. But I feel like like it came out, I saw trailers for it, it was advertised, not heavily, but it was advertised, and then it came out, and then nobody really said anything about it. It's fun and also gets you thinking in the brain about just being a human being and your life. It's a very simple storyline that's executed in a way that looks very difficult. But Paul Dano is a fantastic actor. He's in a lot of things, and I feel like he tends to make a lot smaller movies, but he doesn't get enough credit. Like, he rarely is ever nominated for anything. I don't remember him being nominated for anything for this movie, but I just might be stupid and didn't see anything. But yeah, he needs more recognition in the actor world. Now let's take a little bit of a tonal shift and even a time travel, because we're going to go to the late 1700s. The next movie I want to talk about is a movie called Belle, which came out in 2013, and it was directed by a woman named Ama Santi. Hopefully I'm saying her name right, but I highly doubt it. The movie stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw. It stars Tom Felton, Draco Malfoy. I'm talking about a lot of Harry Potter actors. I didn't do that on purpose, I swear to God. Tom Felton's in this. Sam Reed is in this. There's a bunch of other really famous British actors who are in this. It is loosely based around the true story of a woman named Ditto Elizabeth Bell, who lived during the late 1700s and the early 1800s. Her story is really unique because her father was a Navy SEAL officer for the British Army, and her mother was a slave, so she was mixed race. Period dramas are some of my all-time favorite movies. Pride and Prejudice, Anna Karenina, anything clearly Keira Knightley's in, because half her career is period dramas. I'm a big history nerd, so it kind of just encompasses everything I love, which is film and history. And a lot of the time, period dramas are based off of real stories. But a lot of period dramas tend to look the same, if you catch my drift. It's completely understandable because I feel like life-altering things were a lot more documented for certain types of people, or for more wealthy people, because that's just how the world worked back then. But this one is definitely a breath of fresh air of a film, and it is a movie that I'm very sad that more people are not just buzzing about. So the movie is, well, who it's about is in the title is Belle. She lives with her father first, and then she gets sent off to go live with her aunt and uncle, and her father passes away, and he leaves her a bunch of money, and the aunt and uncle don't really know what to do with her because she is now, with the amount of money that she makes, she's now considered to be in the upper echelon of society, and she needs to find somebody to marry. So they want to set her up with somebody because they're afraid that if they kind of send her out on the dating field, then one, people will take advantage of her just because they know that she's wealthy, and two, people aren't really gonna have an interest in her because she's mixed race. So that's essentially the whole story, is her trying to find love in a way where whoever she ends up with loves her for who she is, and then she's also has this other plot line where she's trying to help this lawyer with the abolitionist movement that's going on at the time. Like I mentioned before, it's just such a breath of fresh air for the genre of period dramas. It's not only amazing to see someone that looks like yourself in a time period where stories of people who look like you aren't really shown a light on very often. And it's also really crazy to me that this woman and I have like a 300-year gap of existence. We exist 300 years apart, and we still have the same thought process about being mixed. We live in two very different times, and we both still feel like sometimes we don't fit in, or that, you know, we're weird and we're different. And that is also something that I really love about this movie. The lead actress for it is incredible. You just feel for her the entire time. She's also in a bunch of other stuff as well, and I'm blanking on her career. So here's a bunch of movies that she's been in. It's also just a really beautiful love story. I'm a sucker for a good love story because that's what most period dramas turn into, no matter what the core message of the story is. You always gotta have that man swooping in, trying to put a ring on it. And it's a really nice movie for people who are into history and who aren't so into history. I feel like anybody can really just sit down and enjoy this movie. And the costuming, as most period dramas are, is incredible. So if you're into costumes, you'll also love this movie and probably get some inspiration for things. Next movie, we gonna take another shift. I'm just staying tonal shifting. Basically a kid's movie, I would say. It's a stop motion animation, which is my favorite form of animation. We have Fantastic Mr. Fox, which came out in 2009 and was directed by Wes Anderson. This movie is voiced by George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson. Wes Anderson's brother's in this too, which is the cutest thing ever. So this movie was based on a Roald Dahl novel that came out in 1970 by the same name. I feel like, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a lot of Roald Dahl's books that have been made into movies. Dang, he's making bank, y'all. You can tell that this movie is based on a book, and the filmmakers of this really wanted you to know that through the entire thing. Each scene is set up with a title, like it doesn't say a chapter number, but it says like what chapter you're going into of the story, which I think is really cute. I could understand how somebody would think that's annoying, but I just think tonally it just makes the movie for me. There's also a ton of other actors in this movie that I didn't mention, but those were just like the main characters. But there's so many people in this movie. There's so many voices. I said it before, I'll say it again. Stop motion animation is an art form. It's like you're watching a piece in a museum. There's just so much work and so many hours that go into it that it doesn't even feel like a movie anymore. It feels like you're watching an art installation. The main plot of this film is you got Mr. Fox and his wife. They find out they're gonna have a kid, And the wife says, I need you to get a real job. I don't want you to ever steal anything ever again, because that is his profession. He steals things. He steals chickens from farms, and he steals cider from places. He steals things. He's Swiper the Fox from Dora the Explorer. So he promises, and he ends up becoming a writer for a newspaper. And he's tired of his boring life, and he wants something better for him and his family, so he moves them all into this really nice tree. And this tree has a view of 3 of the biggest factories in this, I guess, land that they live in. They didn't really specify what part of the world this was in, so I'm assuming it's just a made-up land. The animals can talk. There are no rules. One of the very big plot points in this movie is just kind of accepting what you have, being grateful for what you have, and, you know, not essentially lying to your spouse and telling them that you're not going to do something again, and then you go and you do it. There's also a lot of other plot points that are sprinkled into this movie, which I really appreciate, and that's what a lot of children's literature and children's films do very well, is they have one major plot point, well, not plot point, one major, what's the word I'm thinking of? Lesson. I'm tired. One major lesson that they want you to learn from this movie, but then they have a bunch of little side lessons that they can also teach you if you really think into it. And one of those small lessons is to be okay with being different, because the son spends the entire movie trying to be a good athlete as his father was when he was in school. And everybody kind of makes fun of him because he dresses different and he's not as cool as his dad. He's just different. And it's okay to be different. If everybody was exactly the same or everybody was good at everything, the world would be a very, very boring place. The way this movie was shot is also very interesting to me, and what I mean by that is the voice acting was not done primarily in a studio. I know Meryl Streep's parts were done in a studio, but all of the other actors, the way that they shot their dialogue was they had them actually act it out, which is really cool, and they just recorded them doing that. And they also recorded the dialogue before they did the animation, which is also very rare, because usually when you're a voice actor you have maybe not like a finished visual of what your scene is going to look like, but you have sort of a rough draft to look at and be like, okay, I can kind of figure out how to do the voice to match the movement. But with this one, and I think is a way more efficient way to make a movie, you give the voices to the animators and just have them animate around the voices. If you're a voice actor and you're watching this, then maybe I could just be talking some absolute trash nonsense right now, but as far as I know, from all of the behind the scenes things that I've watched for animation films, like, it's already kind of a rough draft up there that you're working with. Right? I'm not totally wrong, I don't think. But I'm wrong about a lot of things. Rango was a movie that was shot like this, which was the movie about the chameleon that lived in, like, the Wild West. That movie was also shot where they had the actors act everything out, which I think is so cool. It's such a more interesting way, I think, for a voice actor to work than to just be shoved into, like, a little booth and have to talk into a microphone. Wes Anderson movies are just aesthetically very pleasing as well, and for me, I just love the simplicity of all of his movies and the symmetry of all of his films. Everything is symmetrical. Like, there's not nothing, it's not chaotic. Everything has a place. And even when, like, the houses people live in are chaotic, it's organized chaos. So it's just visually a very pleasant film to look at. As great, if not even better, than I remember it being as a kid, because when you're a kid you kind of just get the baseline information of it, but when you watch it as an adult and you kind of have more of a mental understanding of how the world works, you're able to really think a lot more into it, which it's a kid's movie essentially, but when a kid's movie is also entertaining for an adult and you can still learn things from it, that's a sign of a very, very good kids movie, which is why I had to talk about this film. There's a rat in this movie that's played by, oh no, he played the Green Goblin in Willem Dafoe. He's played by Willem Dafoe. He is the smoothest Matthew McConaughey rat I've ever seen in my life, and his skinny jeans would make any emo kid very jealous. Alright, surprise, surprise, we got another A24 movie. Coming in on this list, we have The Lobster, which came out in 2015. It was directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Okay, this movie stars Colin Farrell, Rachel Weisz, Leah Sedux, Leah French last name. Olivia Colman's in there, John C. Reilly's in there. There's a bunch of other recognizable faces. Side note, all of the names for the characters in these movies, particularly the women characters, they don't have real names. The main dudes do, like the little friend group, they're John, David, and Robert, but all of the other people have the strangest names ever on the planet. Like, they didn't even come up with names for them. Nosebleed Woman, Biscuit Woman, Heartless Woman, Loner Woman, Lead Loner Woman. Like, it's very... Nobody has a real name. I don't know what any of these characters' names are. This is labeled as an absurdist dystopian black comedy, and that is the most accurate title for like genre of a movie I've ever heard in my entire life. This is the same director as The Favorite, which came out after this, but that starred Olivia Colman and Rachel Weisz. And then there was a movie that came out before this movie called Killing of the Sacred Deer that had Colin Farrell in it. So this director clearly is pulling a Quentin Tarantino / Martin Scorsese and is working with like the same group of actors for all of his movies. He's starting, I know there's only like his 3 latest movies, but he's starting on that path of like, I like these people a lot, I know what they can do, I'm confident in their abilities to create characters, so I'm just gonna keep putting them in my movies until I stop directing. Which I'm totally fine with, because the 3 actors who I just said who he has consistently worked with over the past couple of years are actors who I severely admire, and one of them earned an Oscar, Olivia Colman, from one of his movies, his last movie that he made. So I get it. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The basic premise of this movie is not it's not basic at all, actually, to be quite honest with you. I just lied. I'm gonna do my best to summarize this movie. But basically, you have a hotel or like a resort that all of the single people in this society are sent to hopefully match up with somebody and find a mate. And you have a certain amount of days to complete this task. And if you don't end up with anybody by the end of how many days they give you, you get turned into an animal of your choice and you get set free into the wilderness forever. The reason why this is called The Lobster is because Colin Farrell's character goes to this hotel with his dog brother who failed this hotel's system to find a lady, and they ask him, what animal would you like to be turned into? And he says he wants to be a lobster. And his reasonings behind wanting to be a lobster were actually decent reasons. I was prepared because I thought that was real dumb, but he gave some good observations. At least he didn't say like a dog. I'm sorry to his brother, but like dog is that's a real boring. You could be like a raven, or you could be a polar bear. You could be anything, and you pick a dog. I love dogs, but I'm not trying to be no dog for the rest of my life. Oh, also, I forgot, you can add to your stay, like you can add days on to how long you're admitted to this place or until you get turned into an animal by hunting the group of loner people that live in the woods. So once a day, all the single people from this hotel go out into the woods and hunt these lonely people. And the more people you bring back is the more days you get added. And that to me, like, you can't make this up. This movie, how do some people write movies, you guys? I'm just confusion. It's basically just kind of an expose on the pressure I feel like society puts on people to find a partner, and how sometimes you feel like you have to in order to live a sufficient life. Very beautifully shot. The dialogue is some of the most ridiculous and also straightforward dialogue. So the people in this movie talk like they just learned how to say words for the first time. Movies like this just keep upping the ante of what I consider to be possible when it comes to filmmaking. There's sometimes where I feel like the film industry gets into like a weird little halt of things not seeming very creative, and you see a lot of the same content over and over and over again. And this movie really was for me the start of kind of breaking that mold, and a lot of A24 films have been doing that, and whenever they come out with a movie, that little barrier for me is just kind of knocked down for a little while, because they constantly keep reinventing the medium of film and what you can do as a storyteller with movies. This movie is nothing short of an A24 classic, and I highly recommend you taking 2 hours out of your life to commit to this movie. I will say though, the ending, while it makes a whole lot of sense, it leaves a lot to be desired, and that's maybe just a me thing, because I like when movies explain, like the ending is explained and it's not left open for interpretation, but it's an A24 movie, and interpretation is what they do best. We've made it to the last movie, and that movie is, again, we're taking a tonal shift, is a little bit of a serious movie, but I feel like it's necessary to be watched. The movie is called Desert Flower. It came out in 2009, and I definitely didn't watch this whole movie on YouTube, and I highly don't recommend that you go on YouTube, type in Desert Flower, and then watch the whole thing. This movie was directed by a German director named Sherry Horman. This movie stars Leah Kabede, I believe. Why did I pick all of the hardest names of actors for this one specific video? Why did I do that to myself? So it stars her as our lead, and then you have Sally Hawkins and Anthony Mackie's in this at some point as well. Based on a true story movie, and it's about the model Waris Daree. Was born in Somalia, and she ended up having to flee due to her being set up in an arranged marriage with a man who was very old, and she wanted a better life for herself. So she went and she fled to the UK, where she tried to make a living for herself doing really dead-end jobs. She worked for free for a while. She, cleaned bathrooms, she scrubbed floors, and then finally one day she was discovered by a modeling agency, and she then kind of just took off, and she's walked runways all around the world, and she's been the face for a lot of really well-known brands like L'Oreal, and she's even been in a James Bond movie at one point that I read, which is super cool. So she even dipped her toe into a little acting as well. It centers around everything that I just said. It's her journey to becoming the model that she was known to be. She became an activist against FGM, which is a subject that I personally didn't really know much about. I knew it existed, but it's not really something that's covered very much in world history classes in, I don't want to say American schools, because I don't know how it works in other states, but at least where I'm from, that was not a topic that has ever been taught to me. Topics such as this in movies, because like I've mentioned before, I feel like the medium of film allows you to present really harsh topics to people in a way that's very palatable and that they can take and not be too overwhelmed by. This movie tells her story beautifully. It's beautifully acted. The actress that they got to play her did a phenomenal job. You feel for her the entire time you're watching this. Sally Hawkins does a great job as her best friend, and I feel like Sally Hawkins is kind of the audience in this perspective. She kind of plays the role of us. We can see things, even though it's not about her, you can kind of see through her eyes a little bit because she's trying to learn about her struggles with FGM just as well as the audience members are. And so it was really nice to have that juxtaposition of this woman who's never heard anything about this trying to sympathize and learn and be caring and try to help this new person who really is just trying to make her way in the world and also deal with these issues that were forced upon her at a very young age. And I love educating myself on people's stories that I feel like if you hadn't seen movies, you wouldn't have known anything about. It's really so hard to find, which is why I totally did not watch it on YouTube, because it's not really available on any streaming services. I tried to find it and buy it, and it wasn't available. So I'm happy that it's available to the public on a free platform. That is not the one I'm currently on. So if you only have time to watch one of the movies that I talked about on this list today, you should definitely check this one out first. A heartwarming story about this woman's journey to success and how she came from this scary situation that she was in and just built a life for herself. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about movies like I've been doing and will continue to do forever. Oh no, you can't even see his face. I just realized that. Oh no. One of the Breakfast Club members is deceased. I'm probably gonna turn this video into like a series because God knows I have just pages and pages of movies that I feel like people don't pay enough attention to or people haven't seen that much. So there will definitely be a part 2 to this in the coming future. Might be soon, might not be soon. I have some other ideas in the works for some genres, some directors, maybe even some actors who I would like to talk about in the future. And follow me on my socials if you feel so inclined to. My Instagram is at itsvictoriatrouble and my Snapchat is at TroubleClub33 and I have a Twitter. I will put that on there too. I forget what my Twitter name is. I'm pretty sure it's Trouble with Tribbles, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it is, but I just got a Twitter. So if you feel so inclined to follow me on Twitter, where I literally only tweeted one thing, then go ahead and do that as well. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. If you check any of these films out, I would love to hear your opinions about them, what you thought, if you're upset with me for recommending a movie to you that you didn't necessarily like. I would love to hear all of it, so feel free to hit me up in the comments section down below. Thanks again for watching. I'm the chatty introvert, Victoria, and I will see you, hopefully, in the near future in my next video. Bye!